Morning, Jamie, and everybody. Welcome to Better Ways Podcast.
Hello,
I'm Tom.
Tom. How you doing?
Hi. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. Sunday morning, early time
Yeah.
for me.
Sun is shining.
hmm
I see you got your Brexit mug.
Oh, we bought this for the builders about seven
Oh, I
years ago.
see.
We thought,
Yeah,
what kind of mugs would we didn't want builders to ruin our mugs with cement and mud.
uh, I
So we
see.
thought, what would they like?
Mine's a bit more depressing, actually. Yeah, I think my wife probably bought this, or
Yes.
my brother.
That's just too
After,
true. That's too
yeah,
honest and too true. That one.
it is, and after our shocking performance yesterday, yeah, I think we've blown it. So
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah. So
Not good.
I think we're going to talk about what's happening in the tech world with everyone
Mm.
getting fired and AI. You
Hmm.
had some thoughts, I think, on what you're seeing with layoffs.
Yeah, so I think it was a Forbes article and another one as well. But the Forbes one talked about the real reasons why these big
hmm
companies, so Google, Meta, etc., are getting rid of loads of people, and it has been a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of people. Obviously, part of that is because the economy's taken a hit and they want to get their share prices back up and whatnot. But so actually, to be fair, they reckon there's actually like two reasons why, and actually one of them is something you and I spoke about, Tom. I think you
hmm
brilliantly um, you described it brilliantly, but I can't remember what you said. It's about people who just kind of just exist to justify their jobs, and then you have people that actually make
Yeah.
a substantive difference to the company. So I
Is
think part
it
of
is
that is
it by any chance this one?
it is indeed, yes, that's the one.
Okay, just so people don't orient themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the one. Yeah. So
Oops.
and actually, what was really interesting about that
Mm.
was it didn't just give one reason. So the first part of it talks about, I think it was possibly Amazon or maybe or Google, whichever one it was, said that the majority of layoffs were in HR.
hmm
Okay, so that's obviously human resources, who I tend to have quite a low opinion of anyway. I've never had good experiences with them whatsoever,
Right.
but also recruiters, so
hmm
internal recruiters. So they've got rid of a big batch of those, and they reckon that part of that was because of the overhiring post COVID,
hmm
or sorry,
hmm
during COVID, because obviously everything online, everything digital exploded in
Exploded. Yeah.
demand, so they needed people. So that's the first
yep.
part. Now, the second part of the article is it talks about actually a lot of software engineers at Google were let go. And
hmm
that was really interesting. And there were two reasons. I'm kind of paraphrasing badly here, but there were two reasons given for that. One was because of the emergence of Chat GBT and
hmm
AI, and apparently Google is behind the times on this. They're playing catch up quite a lot,
Yeah.
and so they've got to make up a lot of ground very very quickly, and they need the money that they're saving from the layoffs to be able to do because they reckon it's going to save them a
hmm
couple of billion quid, which is ridiculous amount of money. I don't get how that figure
Yeah.
is accurate, but yeah,
Well,
I'm
they make a
assuming. I'm
huge amount,
assuming.
don't they?
Sorry.
They make a huge amount, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming those cost cuttings will come from other areas as well, but they need that money to
Mm.
invest into AI to play catch up. But what was interesting about the Google one was because it was a lot of software engineers, they actually broke down as to why they think that was. Because HR you can kind of understand,
hmm
recruiters you can kind of understand.
Yeah.
I work in that world in my day job anyway, so I'm
Yeah.
very aware that we are victims of the market.
Mm.
We suffer first pretty much when the market
hmm
goes down. But with the software engineers, the reason a lot of them that were let go is because AI can now do a lot of the basic coding. So
Right.
you don't need these engineers anymore. And I think it wasn't may not necessarily been that article, so it's a bit fuzzy, but something else I read about AI and ChatGPT, etc., was the fact that AI can do so much coding now that you don't need like
Mm.
slaves of software engineers sitting there at their desk doing this all day every day. And it's the same with graphic designers and things like
Mm.
that because they were saying like these jobs can now be done. They can be automated for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So all these companies are cutting costs massively.
hmm
Plus, maybe if you go on to a bit of a spin off in this conversation, Tom, I don't know if you've seen a lot of the TikTok and Facebook videos of these workers a day in the life at Twitter and a day in the
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Google.
Yeah.
And you're just like, do you do any work? Like, don't get me wrong, looks amazing. I'd love to work there. I'd love to go to my meditation chamber and get free food and whatnot. But do
mm.
you actually do any work? Yeah,
Mm.
come on. So I think that the holy status that have been applied to IT people over the last 5, 6, 7 years in Silicon Valley, that seems to have gone a little bit now. So,
hmm
but yeah, we'll see. It looks like AI is completely just decimating the field.
Well, I guess it will automate more and more things, and I would imagine you're seeing the impact at the lower end of the
Mm,
simpler stuff first.
mm.
which is going to be the biggest majority of programmers. You know, people who have sort of average skills, average to
Mm,
moderate skills, and do fairly repetitive work that would
mm,
easily be automated. Um, but yeah, on the search front, I think that's going to change a lot. Um, and I think you were talking about this as well, that
mm,
the kind of the way that we're used to, Google hasn't really changed
mm,
from a user's point of view, right? We've got the same format. You type in your phrase, and it gives you a list, and then you click down each one in turn to have a look.
mm.
And that basic technology is as it has been for years and years and years and years. But
Mm.
there's new stuff coming, you were saying.
Yeah, so again, it was another article I found. I think it was one of those like widely shared on social media. So I kind of
Mm,
briefly read it, and it showed the difference between asking Google. It's something about solving an equation, and it's
yeah.
got Google to do it. And Google broke it down in a very linear format. I didn't understand a word of it. Obviously, it was way above
Mm,
my pay grade, but it looked like it wasn't done in a very efficient manner. They asked
yeah.
ChatGPT to do it, and not only did it give you the formula, but it broke down the steps and
Yeah.
explained them every step of the way as
Yes.
well. So, and that's massively different because instead of
Mm,
going on to, because when you go into Google, it's pot luck what you're going to get. You're not
mm,
getting an answer to a question. You're getting a
mm.
list of information relevant to the
Yeah. You're getting
question.
links to stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But with ChatGPT, you're getting
The answer.
answers. So when people jump on Google now and
Mm,
they go, oh, is my flight still running tomorrow or whatever? And you have to go through multiple bloody websites and whatnot. If you can go to
yeah.
ChatGPT, is flight XYZ running tomorrow? Yes, Jamie,
Yeah.
it's running. It looks great. Have you bought your first class ticket?
Mm.
yeah, not, which I would never do. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So, yes, because that is a big step forward, I guess. Because otherwise, with Google, you've got to read through whatever you get and find the information in whichever link
Mm,
is the best, most relevant, or maybe across a few links and make some notes yourself, and then work it
mm,
out how it works. Uh, Whereas to get the whole answer and have it worked out is great.
mm,
And I think there's a few thoughts on that. I mean, one is that I think Apple have been working on a search initiative for about 10 years. And no one knows what form that's going to take, whether it's going to be complementary or replace Google. The suspicion is that because Apple pay Google billions a year
mm.
just to feature them as the default search engine on Apple products, because so many
Oh,
people use.
really?
Yeah, because
Oh, I didn't
the
know
share
that.
of the market is so big for iPhones and iPads
Mm,
and all of that. So so just to have the privilege of being the default and not Bing or something else, they pay billions every year, which is
right.
income for Apple. But also, I don't think Apple like Google being the search. They don't really want Google
Mm,
properties on their devices. They want to provide their
yeah.
own experience. They worry about the data protection
They don't
privacy
make it
issues.
easy. Apple,
Yeah,
you have to exist in their ecosystem. Which, to be honest, is one of the
yes,
reasons why I've never had. I've used Apple products, obviously,
mm.
but I've never owned one because I like choice. That's the thing, Like with
Yes.
Apple, you get 3 phones a year. That's it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's you have to buy into the whole ecosystem. Yeah.
Mm,
So
mm,
um, we'll wait and see what their search engine is like. But it was rumored to operate in a fundamentally different way, where you get the
mm.
information you want, not just a list of links, and
That's
obviously
interesting.
without the same kind of ad heavy sponsored links.
Right.
Search engine optimization tricks that are on
Yeah.
Google. Um,
Yeah.
The other thought is that ChatGPT is wrong about quite a lot of stuff at the moment,
Mm,
so it will confidently give you the wrong answer to quite a few things.
mm, yeah.
So I'm not 100%. I mean, it's very impressive what it does, but as because it doesn't really understand what it's doing,
Yeah.
it's to some extent only as good as the input information that's filtered
Mm,
into it, and it can make the wrong conclusions. So I'm going to be very curious as to whether they can eliminate the wrong answers.
mm,
Because if they can't, then it's going to give you something very plausible, which you can't
mm.
rely on.
Could be
Um,
dangerous as well. Yeah.
yeah. So yes, this
And,
could
mm,
this could displace a lot of jobs. I mean, it's been a lot in the media about it passing the bar exam and
mm.
passing various other exams in the states, so it can be licensed practitioner for lots of things without actually knowing anything.
That's insane, isn't it? Like that's
Yeah,
just
but
insane.
I mean, it makes sense that AI would be good at passing exams. It
Mm,
doesn't mean it
yeah,
would be any good at doing the job.
yeah,
So
correct.
I suspect it's overhyped. I suspect that's a harder problem than they've actually solved.
Mm.
And but we'll see how it evolves. But
Mm.
yeah, something like a radically different kind of search would be very useful.
Mm.
I mean, what we still need is what was, you know, in science fiction decades ago, which was you just talk to your digital assistant and they give you all the information you need and they understand the
Yeah.
context and they remember and they remind you. And I don't think we're that far away from that.
No, I don't either. No,
But
I think a few
it's
years.
it's probably more around can you do it reliably? What are the
Mm.
legal issues? Where does liability lie?
Safety issues, so it doesn't go rogue
Safety
and try to
issues.
kill us.
How do you make sure that people don't attack it and
Yeah.
plant Trojan answers or Trojan influence on it? There's a
Yeah.
big fuss at the moment because they have. It won't give you things about Donald Trump, but it will about Joe
You
Biden.
beat me to it. They did a like for like, didn't they?
Yeah,
They
so
asked it.
they're
Yeah.
censoring certain
Yeah.
people and certain phrases, so you can
Yeah. I saw that.
you can comment only positively on certain topics, not
Yeah.
negatively.
That's really dangerous.
There's some woke stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a question about who actually controls it and what are
Yeah.
their politics and do we want to should that be in the hands of a company? It's all being bought by
Mm.
Microsoft, so they'll have huge investment. But do we want that actually controlled by a single corporation, or should there be public control? So I
Mm.
actually think that this is not necessarily mainly a technology problem. I think there's going to be all sorts of moral, social, legal
Yeah.
wrangles and implications, and
Mm.
you're already seeing it banned in certain contexts, and I think you'll
Mm.
probably see a lot more of that. You might have some countries ban it altogether,
Mm.
not least on employment grounds. That if you
Yeah.
allow it to proliferate, now obviously if some other country uses it and it's a massive advantage, that's not going to
Yeah.
last long.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Because if China
I think
use
it's
it,
easy
then
to get really excited about the tech
mm.
and actually think, well, what does this mean? But if it gets in the long run, if it gets rid of a class of jobs which are really quite repetitive,
Mm.
and go look up a bunch of stuff and pull it together. I mean, a lot of journalism now is read Mr. Musk's tweets and write an article from them, and if it can do
Yeah.
things like that, you might as well do that with a computer rather than put someone through the plodding torture of having to do that as their job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so
But
in the long run, that could free people up to do more interesting, creative things.
yeah. Well, the danger with that, and I'm glad you led to it because
Mm,
that's exactly where my head went, and because you and I spoke about this before, one of our previous podcasts, we spoke about things like universal basic income and
yeah.
the other routes because eventually the world's going to go down that. And I was
Mm,
talking to my colleague about this. Well, I was telling him about this, and he was also aware of it, and he'd been talking to his partner and he said to his partner, because you have to familiarize yourself, you have to understand what's going on in the world with this because it will
yeah.
affect our son. Because
Yeah.
obviously for years, like let's face it, last 6 or 7 years, whenever
Mm,
someone the the attack from people on the right to the people on the
mm,
left who've lost their jobs is learn to code. And
yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
Twitter banned that because they said it was like an insult. It was really weird anyway. But for
Yeah.
years we pushed people down the coding route, like years
Mm,
and years and years. And me too, I've advised people, I said, look, I think, don't go into this field now because it's
mm,
dying, go into that field because you've got a guaranteed job.
mm,
Well, actually, like you said, 80% of those jobs, because they're relatively low to middle
yeah.
skills, and they can be automated or done through AI, and they're
Yeah.
gone. You've got huge amounts of people that are obviously going to be unemployed
Yes.
now. The graphic designers was another thing because although that's a fair few years. There's something called is it DALL-E? Yeah, DALL
Yes,
hyphen
but
E.
even there's all sorts of issues.
Yeah,
So
it was terrible. Yeah,
there,
it's really
well,
terrible.
there's some good ones that have come out, superseding that, where
Right.
you can ask it to create a picture involving, a cow and a mobile phone on top of a mountain or something, and it will draw you a nice picture. But the issues that have come up is that those systems have been trained on lots of copyrighted images from places such as Getty Images and other big
Right.
sites, and those places are now suing to say that actually that's not in our terms of reference, and actually we own the result because it's just because you've trained it on our examples, which we own the copyright to, and it's derived by an algorithm. That's therefore our legal property.
Mm.
So there's a lot of intellectual property ownership battles coming on that.
Yeah.
There's also going to be the issue that if you can do that in a picture, you can do that in music,
Hmm.
and that'll give you a similar nightmare because there's always these fusses. Was it lots of copyright battles at the moment?
Mm.
Was it Ed Sheeran
Ed
been
Sheeran was in
involved in
court.
some?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he won. He won
So
it, and then I think someone else sued him.
well, now imagine you've got thousands of variations generated by AI.
Yeah,
And,
and it's
and
not
you
the
know
same
this.
chords.
I'm not
Yeah,
saying they're going to be performing it, but they might have written the music,
yeah,
and they might have written the lyrics.
yeah.
Because by cutting out the songwriters, you'll it would become easier just to be a performer of
Mm,
of the output. But then there's going to be huge ramifications for that, and that's going to take a lot longer to catch up than the technology probably
mm,
will. So,
mm.
so this is another thing where just because it's possible doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. It's going to be allowed, or it's going to be adopted and disruptive as quickly as people say. It could be,
Mm, mm,
but um, it's not at all clear how that would work or where you would be left. And then you'll have the issue of corporations are people. So what the corporations that own the AI will want is to get the money themselves. So they'll want a share of the royalties
yeah,
because it's a new revenue stream. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so they will be Ed Sheeran will be in court. It will be Sheeran versus AI owned
yeah,
by
yeah, yeah,
Microsoft.
yeah.
And he'll be saying, the AI, Microsoft's lawyers, which will probably be an AI lawyer, because law is actually one area where I think AI could be if it were reliable, it could
Yeah.
be immensely disruptive because so much of law is about and legal cases is about reading past cases and finding the precedents and inferring and
Right.
cross-referencing, and
Yeah.
computers are excellent at that sort of job.
Was it
Um,
IBM Watson? Was that the one? Have you heard of that?
was that the one that won Jeopardy? Was it?
I don't know.
Or,
I remember seeing this a couple of
yeah,
years
it's one of
ago.
those AI systems. Yeah.
Yeah, and they said that, and again, I don't know how true the article
Mm,
was, but it said a lot of law firms are actually reducing
mm,
their intake because they didn't have the demand anymore because they
yeah.
could go into IBM Watson and do exactly what
Okay.
you said. It pulls up all the
Yeah.
case law
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
quickly and goes, right, brilliant.
Yeah. So
That's
so you'd still have the
incredible.
barrister,
Yeah,
the
but
top
he'd be
end,
using the arguments,
but
the evidence
what
brought forward by
what you
chap.
don't see in all the law firms is the grunts that are below
Mm,
that. There might be dozens of
yeah,
people very
spend
poorly
15
paid,
hours a night.
up
Yeah,
all night, and that's
yeah.
what you do when you're young. Um, could eliminate those jobs.
Mm,
But again, I mean, there's going to be for it to be relied upon in law cases, it's going to have to be accepted as a reliable
yeah,
tool,
have to be
and there'll be
accurate.
all these questions about independent oversight, checking the accuracy,
Mm,
security. Um, so while people might start doing that, I think there'll be laws banning AI in lots of sectors. I
mm,
think we'll have a whole
mm,
spate of that going on for quite a few years until we've got to grips with how to regulate these things, um,
mm.
because of all those implications. Um, and yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, with those people not having those jobs, what will people do? Um, but I mean, I think with the AI and the automation and robotics and all of that, it should mean people need to work less and need to do less. We
Mm,
should be able to bring down the basic costs of items a lot, which will alleviate poverty.
mm.
And I think it will be a big issue. Are how many people are actually going to make the effort to be creative when they don't have to,
Mm.
versus just sort of exist plugged in, or
Yeah,
Matrix style,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. Particularly with a Meta doing
zombified. Or
their
think of that
yeah virtual
what was that
reality.
Spielberg film, that virtual reality film, where everyone's plugged into this VR universe. It was a few years ago with Spielberg. Can't think of the name of it.
I can't think what that is.
See, an AI would be doing a better job than me right now because it would have the details straight away.
Yeah,
Yeah, but so where people basically live a very basic existence, and they just live in order to get plugged into this fake world which doesn't really exist. So I think we're
yeah,
gonna have lots of issues around that in the long run, triggered by
yeah.
this. Because the noble idea in things like Star Trek was that because you didn't have to work and you didn't go without anything, you would all dedicate yourselves to improvement. um,
Mm.
and exploring the galaxy. But I would say the evidence says that that's a small fraction of people who are motivated enough to do that.
Yeah. Most of us were sitting our ass plugged
Awful
in
lot
doing
of
something
people
else.
would be watching
Yeah,
VR Desperate Housewives or something,
yeah, yeah. Of
or
course,
some
yeah,
dystopian interactive version, rather
yeah.
than actually engage in anything real.
Yeah, you're right. Particularly now. Particularly now. I think. As you know,
Yeah.
I'm honest. I use social media a lot, but I think it's
Mm.
massively damaging, like hugely damaging. Particularly, it's amazing how
Mm.
our minds create technology, and then our technology warps our minds, and
Yeah.
we go down an entirely new societal or cultural path as a result of a
Yeah.
piece of technology that we built. Like the people who built the technology over a period of decades that led to social
Yeah.
media, if they could see what. So basically, imagine that you're sitting there for
Mm.
X amount of years ago, going to build this wonderful thing, and it's going to
Mm.
revolutionise the world. Right, I'm going to travel forward in time and see what people are using it for. Right, they're looking up cat videos on YouTube and having arguments with strangers
Yeah.
plus showing their rear ass to get likes. Okay, that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
quite what I
And
had
porn
in
and
mind
all
for
the
this.
rest of it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, lots of people said when TVs became popular that all children were going to do was sit and watch telly, and to a large extent that did happen,
Mm,
and they were right. And then video games, and that's true, and then the internet and social media, as you say, have got people addicted to that. So,
mm,
um, I mean, I guess it's an interesting philosophical question about is although that's not real in quotes.
mm,
Does it matter less or more than something that is real in quotes uh, at the end of the day? Since
mm.
we're all here only for a certain period, and it's um, what is reality in all those debates? Are we living in a simulation that people
Oh, yeah.
have? So you could say, yeah, all of that, all of those predictions were right and they've happened, but
Yeah.
somehow we're still going. Is that just because there are enough people who haven't bought into
Right.
that, or is
I,
it because
yeah.
actually more and more of us are just doing jobs that actually don't mean anything,
Mean anything. Yeah.
and the and sooner or later the remaining jobs are going to be automated, handed over to robots, AIs, and the other.
Mm.
And so it's just a pretense. It just looks like it's still ticking away, but actually, maybe the majority of, I mean, certainly in the UK, the majority of people are in, office jobs where they may or
Mm.
may not, as we've talked about before,
Actually do anything.
they might be
Yeah.
bullshit
Be
jobs.
included. Yeah.
To use the title of that book, there might be bullshit
Mm.
jobs that don't mean anything and aren't actually necessary. It's a bit like
Mm.
Douglas Adams and you know the they they put all the uh, was it telephone sanitizer that the Golgafrinchans, they went to this planet and they decided to get rid of a useless third of their population, and one of the and it was tended to be the practical people,
Yeah.
including telephone sanitizers, which was a profession. Um, and
Right.
the entire population was wiped out by a new virus contracted from a dirty telephone.
Right.
Some
Yeah.
years later, because they just said, "Well, we don't need these people who do the practical stuff.
Right.
We'll just have all of those who can debate and philosophize, and
Yeah.
you know,
And nothing gets done, basically.
nothing,
Yeah,
yeah,
as well.
nothing
Yeah.
got done, and nothing practical got fixed."
Yeah.
Um, because they figured that sector of society was useless and redundant because they had no
Mm.
experience of it themselves.
Mm.
So yeah, I think stories like that have an awful lot, uncomfortable level of truth in them.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, all of that is. I think the other point you make was the one around this is happening faster and faster. How do you adapt
Mm.
to it? How do you adapt your
Mm.
family to it? Your children? How do you? Um, I think
How do you
that's a
secure a future?
yeah. Well, that's a concern because it's like it becomes so hard to keep up that I think fewer and fewer people do,
Yeah,
and therefore
I agree.
you're actually what that's doing is meaning that the technological gap between youngest and the oldest is growing
Mm.
because the change is growing and the rate and fewer people are adopting. And at an earlier age, people stop adopting new stuff because they think, well, it's too much stuff, it's too much change. I can cope with this. This does what I want. So that's probably changing who we are in quite fundamental ways.
Mm.
And I don't know what that means, but that's another trend through all of this.
Mm.
Yeah.
the concern is as well. And again, I said this to my colleague. If this, we don't know how this is going to go. We don't know the impact it's
Mm.
really going to have on the world from an employment perspective. But again, you and I spoke about this in the past, where if you have like, large proportions of the population that just can't get jobs because they don't exist anymore, or
Yeah.
the jobs are so low paid and the cost of living keeps going up and up and up. And
Mm.
what do you do? You know, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, but governments are not the best at predicting future
Yeah.
trends and dealing with them. So
Mm.
the onus is on the individual. But like you just said, there's so much stuff that you can do, and also it's you and I spoke about reskilling, retraining before.
Mm.
We've had your idea, and I think I
Mm.
actually accused you of stealing it. You must have been spying on me 15 years ago,
Mm.
about how we give people the opportunity to retrain.
Yeah.
But then if it's moving that fast, because let's just say you had
Yes, you
spent
can't keep up. Yeah.
if you'd spent 2 years learning how to code, for example, because I go at the start of lockdown, I gave it a
Mm.
go until I went, Jesus, this is boring
Mm.
as hell. This is making me really unhappy. Why am I doing this?
Mm.
So I stopped doing it. But let's just say if I'd have followed it through, and now I was in the very junior stages of my professional career in coding, for example. So I started at mid 2020, year or two to get skilled, get my first job, say
Mm.
mid 2022, 6 months into my career, thinking, oh,
Yeah.
I'm on a safe path now. And then AI comes along and wipes out the entry level positions. You're like, that oh,
Mm.
fuck me. What do I do now? I've wasted 3 years of my life. What do I do? So yeah, I don't know who could possibly have an answer to that, because if there are safe jobs and everyone trains or sends their kids to train, down to do
Yeah,
those
it's too
safe jobs.
slow. It doesn't keep. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
By the time you've
Mm,
had a new generation trained in it, it's moved on and it's become
mm.
automated, or it's something else. It's the hot profession.
Scary, isn't
Yeah,
it? That,
I think it will. I think we need to be talking about it. We need to be thinking of creative solutions. I think it's the change. It's the changeover that will be
mm.
the difficult bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once everything is automated, there'll be bounty for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether I'm highly skeptical people will make good use of that time, but then there'll be arguments about whether they should. Because
Mm,
why should you have to if you don't have to do
mm.
anything?
Yeah.
So there'll
Yeah.
be lots of philosophical arguments about that. But getting
Mm,
to that will be quite disruptive, and
mm.
a lot more disruptive than we've seen because, especially in this country, because it'll be white collar jobs
Yeah.
that are increasingly removed, and there'll still be blue collar jobs for a long time, probably, which are
A
best done
long
by
time.
humans.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, that is a worry.
Mm.
But yeah, maybe that will cause a backlash against technology and progress, and we'll have a new
God.
Luddites era.
Yeah, we become Luddites. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
I think there'll be a call for that, though. I think you're right.
oh, there'll
Because
be
already,
a lot of call for that.
yeah,
There already
already
is.
people, yeah, exactly. People are disengaging, and I know the evidence between things like social media, modern living,
Mm,
etc. The social media thing I buy into. The idea, and I push back, and I see this a lot in the therapeutic world, and it's just
mm,
mad to me that life is so much harder and worse now, and that's why mental
mm.
health is like, well, and I'm like, that's grade A horse poop because our ancestors 100 years ago had it
Yeah,
1,000 times worse than we did.
yes, yeah,
we just take it for granted and we bitch and whinge a lot. So it's like,
yeah.
oh, okay, fair enough. So it's like, how do
Mm,
you deal with that? But yeah, I don't know. The disengagement thing is an interesting one. It wouldn't
mm.
surprise me if maybe in the future, Tom, if there is a world of abundance, like you said, you go and live in the woods with your community. You have an AI that takes
Yes.
care of everything else.
So I suppose it could enable create your own lifestyle.
Mm,
And that could be something like that, back to nature, made
mm.
possible by AI. So you don't actually
Yeah,
have to do the hunting and gathering.
yeah, you have to do the hard work.
You don't have to build the shelter, gather the wood for the fire, and all that. But you could live that
Yeah,
life if you wanted to.
yeah.
It certainly could involve a craft renaissance, and
Mm,
crafts could be anything, including tinkering with technology and
mm,
um, computers. But it would be kind of a craft activity rather than anything serious, because serious
mm.
stuff would all be AI designed and AI built and big scale and all that.
God,
So there
yeah.
could be people who do that for their own interest and learning, and I could see a lot of jobs where people were just emulating something AI can do on a bit like
Yeah,
cave dwellers drawing paintings of
yeah,
the animals they see and the world
yeah,
around them.
handmade candles versus
Yeah.
mass-produced candles, for
Yes,
example.
yes,
Yeah,
or whatever the
absolutely.
technology is, you
Yeah,
have some human-made
yeah,
imitation which doesn't work, but
yeah, yeah.
um,
But it's
it's a
handcrafted.
curiosity. It's
Yeah,
handcrafted.
yeah. That's true. That would be
Um,
big. Yeah.
so that's possible, but I have to say, I think it would drive practical people mad if they. I don't know what they'll do. Um, I suppose there might be a big enough market in that. So yes,
Mm.
maybe the future will be a diversity of lifestyles which don't impact other people with the resources to achieve that. I mean, this is assuming we avoid extinction and all sorts of other
Yeah,
likely events.
yeah. Not likely that is it. We're really, I think we're pretty buggered. Yeah, yeah. Although one last point because
Mm,
again,
sure.
we are heading towards that
Yeah.
Star Trek
Yeah.
utopian world. Did you? I don't know. Again, I read things so quickly in passing. So I'm
Mm,
doing stuff and I'm like,
mm,
oh, what's that? That's interesting, and
mm,
then I just touch on it and get back to work. There was I don't know, I need to find the article, but it was some lab created matter out of nothing for
right.
the first time.
Right.
I say nothing. That's my very non-scientific understanding of it. I'm sure there was some kind of base ingredient, but they were able to create matter for like X amount of time or something like that. That's going into kind of like the replicator from Star Trek territory, that is, and that is a world of abundance at that point. You imagine
Oh
that you push the
yes.
button, you have everything you want. Oh right,
Energy
yeah.
to matter conversion. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. There's lots of things that like that would be transformative, but you don't need them. I think for what we're talking about. So
mm,
if you had robot labor, the cost of barring difficulties getting the raw ingredients, but
yeah.
presumably you'd have robot mining and other things going
Mm,
on, and maybe robots getting stuff from other parts of the solar system. Um,
mm,
so, barring actual raw ingredients, the cost of almost anything that we consume daily would drop to zero or near zero.
mm.
Um,
Fully
uh,
automated luxury communism is the name
yes,
of the book.
yes. So right. Oh right, cool.
Mm,
So, um, so the question is, would that be desirable? is
mm.
it is a world like that dystopian or utopian, or both?
Oh,
Who
God,
knows?
yeah.
Um,
I don't think we know, do we? Because we can't, we don't, we never understand people. We never understand humans. Let's face it, we don't. We have good guesses about how people are going to behave, and then they
mm,
surprise you, and weird stuff happens, and things come along that we think is going to impact the world in one way,
mm,
and it impacts the world in the other way. I think if there's one word that sums up humans, it's chaos, isn't it? We're just like,
mm.
I don't
A
know.
bit of
I,
we,
yeah,
we
that's
get a
why
bit
I'm
of
quite
everything.
apathetic about a lot of things. I'm like, I used
Yeah.
to be so like my personality type is control as much as you can control to make
Mm-hmm.
the least painful world that you can control.
Mm,
As I get older, particularly the last few years, because everything that's happened, I'm like, that's that's just a dead end road. You can't do it. I could be automated out of existence in terms
mm,
of work. The next few years. All right, bugger, that's really scary. What can I do about it? Not a lot. I have to try and think about how I could retrain and do whatnot. But if you
mm,
if you lurch from crisis to crisis, I think that was it. Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Life finds a way, and I think we'll just
mm.
find a way to keep chugging on in some form.
Yes, I think so.
Mm.
But I don't know. One big meteor strike could all be over.
There is that. There is that.
There's
Yeah.
plenty of evidence for
Yeah.
that, but that's probably for another podcast.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I've been reading about the Younger Dryas period and you know possible lost previous civilizations.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, which point to all of that happening quite a lot often than we think.
Mm. What was it? What was it you're reading?
Well, there's lots of resources,
Mm.
books and things online. A chap called Graham Hancock has a
Did the
series on
Netflix show?
Netflix show.
Yeah.
So there was a period called, I'll just briefly mention it for this podcast, but there's a period called the Younger Dryas, which was around 12,500 years ago. Well, 11 to 12,000 years before now. When there was some rapid climate change both ways, so there was a period of warming and then latter cooling. There was a big melt, and there are flood myths all over the world around this time from lots of
Oh wow.
civilizations. And one of the theories is that there was a comet that broke up and hit or a meteor shower or something similar that hit the world around that time with lots of impacts, which caused massive tsunamis, which washed across the continents.
Mm.
I mean, thousands of feet high waves.
Wow.
There was a mass extinction of half of all the large animal life, including humans. Um, so not as bad as the dinosaur impact, but very disruptive.
Mm.
And it was around the time that Atlantis and other things disappeared. And so the assumption has always been that modern civilization happened more recently, with the Egyptian culture onwards for the last 5,000 to 6,000 years. But they've now found remains from 12,000 years ago, and there's speculation that some of the things that we've already got, like the Sphinx, might be 20,000 years old, or 100,000 years old, not merely 5,000 years old. And therefore, you start to think, well, they must have had things. They must have had forms of farming and industry and tools and technologies that we don't know about now in order to do the things that they did. So there's lots of speculation about were there. Are we just the latest, thinking we're the greatest, but we haven't been wiped out yet or decimated back to the Stone Age. But the other thing is that actually that was only 12,000 years ago that there was a lot pretty cataclysmic events.
Yeah,
it's a lot more recently than 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. So actually, perhaps it happens a lot more often than we've thought. Perhaps there's been lots of civilizations.
Yeah.
Humans have been around. I think humans have been around for about 800,000 years in present form. So maybe there've been lots of civilizations start, flourish, and then get destroyed by a disaster, and then the new civilization starts, flourishes, goes in a different direction.
Yeah. That's a really fascinating idea. That
And there's a load of wacky stuff in there too. When people saying, well, maybe they could master ultrasonics, and that's how they could shape and move large stone blocks around and stuff. We don't know. But I think it's interesting because archaeology is changing a lot. There's an old guard which they've decided that the settled history is settled. They know where we came from. They know they've got a story about it. They've got evidence. They don't want new evidence that changes and challenges that.
He got a lot of criticism, didn't he? I read articles from archaeologists slating him.
He's been slated for years, but Randall Carlson's another one. Who's been a professor who's been working in this space for a long time, looking at that period. It needs explanation because something dramatic happened and we don't know why, and we don't know what. Obviously, changed the landscape massively. Around the world. So yeah, that's the flip side of all this positive stuff, and that's where we should stop.
We should finish it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Good talking to you, Jamie.
You too. Indeed.
Until next time.
See you soon.
Cheerio.
Take care.